Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Well, hi, and here we are again, Fahrusha.
Yes, indeed. Here we are. Do you want to slate today?
No, you go right ahead. You're very good at slating.
All right. We have here today, we're in February.
Yeah, almost the end.
Almost the end of February, yeah. I'm just looking for the date, actually. I don't even remember the date.
Oh, February 27th.
Okay, today is February 27th.
I hope.
2018. And we have a very interesting show for everybody today. And we'll be very, very proud and happy to present another member of the Society for Scientific Exploration. And that's not her only credit at all. She has lots and lots of credits. But I mean, even organizations to which she belongs. But she is a person who has received her doctorate in pharmacology and toxicology with a minor in immunology and microbiology from the University of Arizona in 2003. But she is known to us as a person who began the Windbridge Institute. So let us welcome Dr. Julie Beischel to Shattered Reality.
And a hearty welcome at that.
A hearty welcome. And I always feel like we should clap because I'm always thinking about the stage presence here, and we don't have a background clapping. So good afternoon, Dr. Beischel. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. And the first thing that I think we want to ask you about is the Windbridge Institute versus the Windbridge Research Center. I have heard you speak at an SSE meeting and met you and your husband, Mark, Dr. Mark Bacuzzi. But I understand now you've changed the setup of your organization. So maybe you would start there.
Okay, that's a good place to start. So in 2008, Mark and I started the Windbridge Institute, and we had a lot of different research interests. And one of them was mediumship and after-death communication. And at the end of 2017, we moved that line of research to the new nonprofit Windbridge Research Center. And so what remains at the Institute is intention and intuition research, but
cool.
We moved all of the after-death communication and afterlife research, including mediumship, to the new nonprofit Windbridge Research Center, which is dedicated to performing rigorous scientific research and creating free educational materials with the purpose of alleviating suffering around the topics of dying, death, and what comes next.
That's really extremely fascinating. And I must say that I'm equally fascinated with the ideas of intention and, other psychic abilities that might be still under the auspices of the Windbridge Institute. But for today, I think we're going to concentrate on the whole idea of mediumship. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the idea of survival of consciousness.
Okay. So there is a theory called materialism that posits that the brain creates consciousness. Mm-hmm. And all you are is chemistry and biology. And when the brain dies, you die and you are gone forever.
Yes.
The competing hypothesis is talks about non-local consciousness, and that theory is that consciousness, the brain doesn't make consciousness, but consciousness exists sort of somewhere, and like saying where, who knows where that is. And like there's a lot of concepts about how we experience reality, that things have a place and a time, but this non-locality theory is that consciousness, it sort of exists beyond space and time, and
yes.
that it's just filtered or like an antenna through the brain.
Or
so
a-
the signal is out there and everywhere, but your brain serves as the antenna to pull it into so that you feel like you're centered in this meat bag we have, the body. But really, you're everywhere, and this is why things like precognition and telepathy and clairvoyance can happen, because consciousness isn't trapped in the brain. It has access to all of this other information forward and backward in time and all over the universe. And so survival of consciousness just it feeds on that, in that when the brain dies, the consciousness doesn't die, because it didn't exist in there anyway. It always existed outside of you. And so when your body dies and your brain dies, you continue to exist. And so that's called survival of consciousness.
Now, within survival of consciousness, thinking of the brain as a transceiver or a radio kind of operation, it does, though we do have to wonder whether we survive as a general energy, or do we have survival of personality, right? That would be in there too.
Right. Like how we're defining consciousness can get really messy, and we don't really know. There's so much about all of this we just don't know yet. But so it's sort of like the main pieces are there. Well, there's something that survives. We know, Mark and I talk about the planks in the survival platform. So mediumship is one, near-death experience research is one, out-of-body experience research is one. So there are these different things. There's the old metaphor of any one of those. You may be able to break one stick, but when you put the sticks in a bundle, it's very difficult to break.
Absolutely.
So all of those research areas together really demonstrate that this is a characteristic of consciousness, that it can survive physical death.
And Dr. Julia Mossbridge is in this Windbridge organization with you. She's joined forces with you.
No, she has her own institute, the Mossbridge Institute. It gets it's Julia Mossbridge and Julie Beischel, and it's Mossbridge Institute and Windbridge Institute and Windbridge Research Center. It gets very confusing. But no, like she and Mark are working on a project together currently through the Windbridge Institute and the Mossbridge Institute. But Julia serves on our scientific advisory board at the Windbridge Research Center, but we don't do research with her on these topics per se.
Okay, so I'm a little mistaken there.
Your background in immunology interests me too, because obviously that's one cell recognizing an external cell. When it comes right down to it, sort of in a very broad category. And it's information. It's it's the whatever the immune response is, it recognizes a foreign body, let's say. So it's almost, I think you're almost doing that with consciousness and so on. It's like our bodies are somehow attuned to recognizing an external force, and some people probably have it a little bit more than others.
Yeah, and I mean, that's sort of the principle behind the placebo effect, right? Mm-hmm. That even things that chemically can't do anything contain the information, and or your belief system contains the information that can heal you. And there's a lot, like there's so much that's just so fascinating to me coming from a medical background, that the mind built the body. So whatever the mind tells the body does. And so I'm really fascinated by the causes of disease that are metaphysical or, karmic even. That's for like the next decade. I'll study that. But right now I'm studying mediums.
But the intention part comes in strongly there, although we're not going to go totally down that road today. But I'm very familiar with intention and using intention, and amazing the results you can get from using intention, including hopefully self-healing.
And right. Also, Dr. Beischel, with pharmacology, we could go back to the 60s, and where pharmacology became sort of a group sport. I don't know. But, I'm wondering that I think a lot of your background almost pointed you into this path in a different way. Like you didn't start out studying consciousness or life after death or whatever. But the background that you did develop certainly gave you a great start into studying these.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good training to have because as an empiricist, I'm trained in how to apply the scientific method to any topic. Right? Science is it's not a set of knowledge or, facts. It's a toolbox, and you can apply those tools to any concept. So that really, that previous training in these integrated fields of pharmacology and medicine and that training really served me well in the job that I do now.
I think you're going to have to go over this, although I believe Kate and I already know this, or listeners don't necessarily know it. So what you're going to have to go over a little bit is the methodology, the triple blind way that you have tested the mediums.
Oh my gosh, it's quintuple blind. There's 5 levels of blinding, and it's so complicated that no one who ever tried to sum it up, medium, journalist, physician, scientist, no one's ever got it right. That's how complicated it is.
But first of all, I mean, just basics. What do you define as a medium?
Oh, that's a good place to start. So and how do we define it versus like, what is it, right? Yeah, because different people have different definitions. So we define a medium as someone who experiences regular communication with the deceased. And we differentiate that from psychic, as a psychic is a person who experiences the ability to obtain information about living people or distant places or the future or the past that they didn't know about, but not communication with the deceased. So the common wisdom is all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums.
Okay.
Well, that sounds reasonable. I want to, at the end of our session here today, I'll probably go into asking you some things that come more from the idea. I work as a working psychic, so I will have some questions from that point of view, but we're not going to go there now, simply because I want to make sure that our audience understands what you've done here, and they certainly will be interested in the whole idea that it was impossible for any information to be given to the medium other than the name of the deceased person. So if you'll go into your quintuple.
Quintuple, yeah. We just say fully blind. Which we've done our best to try and control for all the normal explanations that could be put forth as, oh, well, a medium got all this stuff right about a dead person. Oh, well, it was just this. So we've tried to account for all of those. It was just this explanations. So the first thing that we addressed was what's called cold reading, where the medium reads cues, subconsciously or not, from the living person getting the reading is called the sitter. So the medium can read cues from the sitter, even things like pupil dilation and inhales and things like that, and to sort of steer and fabricate an accurate reading. So in our protocol, the medium doesn't have any contact with the sitter. So we do telephone readings. We have a team of about 20 mediums that we work with, research mediums, and I've never even been in the same room as some of them because we do all of our research on the phone. So just me and the medium are on the phone, and all we have is the first name of a deceased person. And the name is required. The understanding is the name is required because the medium needs some sort of nugget to begin to know what to focus on. And there's also the issue of the sitter, by giving us the name, gives us permission to talk to their deceased loved one. So there's a lot of sort of intentional components to all of this. So we get the first name of the deceased person from someone else, like Mark. There's 3 people. There's 3 experimenters. So usually then Mark will send me a first name of a deceased person, and then I get on the phone with a medium, and this is all randomized and counterbalanced and all that sort of stuff. So then I get on the phone with medium, I give the medium the first name, and then I ask her 5 questions about that deceased person. So I say, what did the person look like in their physical life? Describe their personality. What were their hobbies or activities? How did they die? And do they have any specific messages for the absent sitter? And so in this protocol, I serve as what's called the proxy sitter. So I don't know anything about the sitter. I don't know anything about the deceased person. So I can't cue the medium. I can't leak any information intentionally or not, because I don't have any information. And then we transcribe that reading, and then the medium does another reading exactly the same for a different deceased person. And we transcribe that, we put it into an itemized list where it, like, because a medium might say, I think she had sort of red hair, and we, like, you can't score that as true or false, right? So we say she had red hair. We change all the statements to concrete statements, and then the sitter scores each item in the readings, and they give the overall reading a global score, and they're given 2 readings, and then they pick which one they think is theirs. So they receive 2 blinded readings, one that was for their dead person and one that was for a different deceased person, and they don't know which is which. So this protocol in total controls for cold reading, which includes information so general it could apply to anyone because we ask those specific questions. It controls for rater bias. It addresses rater bias because they're given 2 readings. So if the personality of the sitter is someone that they're going to score everything as correct, then they'll score both things as correct. And what we're looking for in the data is the difference between the two. It's not, we don't have like a level that we go, okay, this is good. No, we look statistically at the difference between the two. And so like I said, and it controls for queuing, and because no one has any information that can be leaked. The person that gives the readings to the sitter for scoring is a third experimenter. So that person doesn't know which reading is which when they talk to and it's all over email. It's very controlled. Like a lot of times film companies will want to we want to document the protocol. Like, oh no, it is so boring because no one's in the same place at the same time. It's all like printed and on email. Like it's not visually sexy at all, but it's very well scientifically controlled.
And it's very interesting to me. I don't know about sexy, but interesting for sure.
And what are your results?
So we did that with 20 mediums. Mm-hmm. We did 58 readings, and we published a paper in 2015 with those results, and they were statistically significant that the whole reading score, the item by item scores, and the pick which reading is yours data were all statistically significant. So the blinded sitters gave their own readings higher scores than someone else's reading without knowing which was which.
And the mediums are mostly women.
Yes. And we recently did a survey study where we surveyed a bunch of Americans and mediums and non-mediums. And from the population that we had access to, the mediums were 90% female, but so was the control group. So it really worked out well because then we could compare all the data. Because a lot of times you can go, oh, well, all these mediums score this on this test. And it's really difficult to compare it to norms, like published norms, because published norms usually are 50% male, 50% female, but mediums are 90% female. So how do you compare that to published norms? You can't. So you collect your own, quote, norms from non-mediums, which is what we did, who were also 90% female.
Strangely, the public mediums, the stage mediums, some of whom I assume are magicians, but some of whom may have some element of psychic credibility, on the other hand, most of them are men.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, but think about that. You can say that about any profession, right?
Right.
Because men have ruled the world for so long. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily. But yeah, what we're finding is like on the ground, 90% of mediums are female, at least American mediums.
Yes, I would agree.
Do you think that maybe socially it's a lot more acceptable for a woman to be a medium than a man?
Oh yeah, I think that's why. Like we have a psychologist on our team, Chad Mosher, and someone asked him that question. He's a clinical psychologist, and he said that's like asking why are there more men chemists?
Yeah,
because it was more acceptable for them to do that. Like it's not perhaps socially acceptable for men to become mediums, publicly to become mediums, as it is for women.
You know, in one of your talks, Dr. Beischel, you gave an analogy about testing mediums to playing football on a baseball field underwater or something like that. Can you do that again? I think that would really give.
Yeah, studying mediumship, where when you trying to do it the way you think mediumship would work is like studying football on a baseball field using the rules for hockey and basketball equipment or something like that. So you have to instead, if you really want to study it, you have to study it as close to as it exists in nature. So an optimal research environment so that if the phenomenon exists, it can show itself. So you need optimal research environment, but then 2, you need maximum controls. So you need to address all the other explanations for what it can be. But if you want to study football, you have to use a football field, you have to use football equipment. And now you can study football. You can't put football players on like an ice hockey rink and then go, they can't do it. We disproved hockey. No, you didn't.
I love that analogy, really. I just cracked up when I heard it.
Well, I think one of the nice things about your work is a lot of people would say, well, that's interesting and, so what? But you really make the point that what you're doing with your work is to give a lot of people relief, to calm down in hospice situations, to help people through that horrible situation. And I think that's really very, very valuable and a good thing that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, we regularly come back to the question when we're designing studies of so what, right? Because there's lots of things like, we have an MRI, let's stick a medium in. Well, wait, what's the research question? And then you have to start there because there's lots of cool things that we could do, but we have limited resources and limited time, and we need to systematically go to the next research question that, what is the next answer we need? And at the end of the day, it's how can this alleviate suffering, right? That's the mission of the Windbridge Research Center, is to alleviate suffering around dying, death, and what comes next. So by normalizing mediumship as, this is something that happens, people have this experience, it's multimodal, they smell and hear and taste and feel things from the deceased person, like, oh, okay, then it normalizes that as an experience and it's not weird anymore. And the same thing goes for spontaneous after-death communication experiences that people have that they have themselves with their deceased person. Those are normal and regular and to be expected too. And just knowing that alleviates suffering, because then people don't think they're going crazy because they've, felt their deceased husband in the bed next to them one night. Yeah, that happens, and it's not weird, and you're not crazy. And so that's the kind of thing that's our mission, is to get that information out into the world.
Yeah, that's very worthwhile. And to that point, obviously, you're going to need donations. So let's.
Yeah, we should.
Definitely. Let's.
If you want, to put out your email address or the site where you would get donations. So please feel free to advertise a little bit now.
Okay, so here's where the plug comes. Okay, I'll do the plug.
Yeah, do the plug.
You get two chances to do the plug. This is your first.
Okay, good. Our website is www.windbridge.org, and on that site, right from the homepage, there's a donate button, and we would be very appreciative if you would help us. We're just getting off the ground, and we have very few free educational materials because we're still getting up and running. So we need your donations to make this thing work. And then also, while you're there, please join our email list so that we can tell you when we put up new free educational materials, or when we're going to be in your town talking at this conference or that conference, or when we are going to do webinars, or those kind of things. So number one, in no particular order, make a donation. And number two, join our email list at www.windbridge.org. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Again, a very worthwhile cause.
Very much so. So we're talking here about survival versus something else, right? I mean, there are people who have posited that what actually happens, may or may not be survival of some sort, but that often the mediums might get some information through normal psychic means. I believe you used the words psychic reservoir and super psi, correct?
Well, it gets really messy, and we recently published a paper. Yeah, historically, the two theories about where mediums get their information, because no matter how much accuracy data under blinded conditions you collect, you can never figure out where the data came from, where the information came from. If the dead person tells the medium about something that's going to happen in the future, you can say, oh, that's called precognition. If you say, oh, the sitter didn't know it, but then they had to check with their family members, yeah, that's called telepathy or clairvoyance. So no matter what a medium says, it can always be sort of explained away as normal psi, where that doesn't involve a dead person. So we used to call those two things, the one theory that a medium is talking to a dead person is called survival psi, and the alternative theory that the medium is not talking to a dead person and getting their information some other psychic way is called somatic psi. But we recently did a study where we had 122 mediums describe their experiences when receiving mediumistic information from a dead person, and then their experiences when getting psychic information about a living person, and again, counterbalanced and all that stuff. And we found that sometimes in getting information about the living, the medium will experience it as communication from the deceased. So historically, there's been this theory like, oh no, they're getting information about the dead from the living, and then this new finding implies no, they're also instead getting information about the living from the dead.
Wow.
So it's very, like, the lines are now blurred. Historically, like in the beginning of the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research in the 1880s, most of the mediums that they studied went into full trance, and they didn't have any conscious recollection of the reading after it was over. Today, the mediums stay, for the most part, fully conscious, and we can ask them to describe their experiences. And when we did that, they said, oh no, I totally can tell the difference between communication from a deceased person and getting psychic information about a living person. It feels totally different.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to stop you. I wanted to ask you a few questions about those different things, but did I interrupt you? So maybe.
No, go ahead. What are your questions?
Well, okay, so we have the idea of survival, and then we have psychic reservoir, Akashic record sort of stuff, and the other idea of super psi, or what you said, somatic psi, and how it's kind of blurred. The first question that I have to ask about that, and I'm not sure whether it was you, I think it wasn't you, but one of your associates who did an experiment and found out that different parts of the brain were being used.
We did an EEG study.
Yes.
With 6 Windbridge mediums, maybe 5. Sorry, we did a blood, like a hematology study too, and one of them had 5 and one of them had 6, and I never can remember which was which. But we did an EEG study with at least 5 mediums, and we had them consciously enter different mental states. And so one was invite, like before the experiment, we said, talk to someone in your family, someone deceased in your family, invite them to come and talk to you during our experiment. Because it had to sort of be like, they had to sort of turn it on and off.
Yes.
And so that was one of the conditions, communication. Then there was one called fabrication, where we said, make up a person and think about that person. Then we said, recollection, think about a living person you know and think about them. And then perception. I'm going to read you some information out loud, and you're going to listen to me talk about a person. And then we took their EEG during those 4 conditions. Mm-hmm. And communication looked different than the other 3. It most looked like perception. So it most looked like listening to someone, but it didn't look anything like fabrication, like making something up, imagination, or recollection.
Well, that's very, very interesting. So as going back to the survival versus super psi or psychic reservoir, Akashic record, I sort of think that psychic reservoir and super psi come down to the same thing. I mean, you could define it differently, but the information is coming from outside the person somehow through some form of telepathy or psi. And then there is the idea of it being that someone is actually speaking to the personality of the discarnate of former human. Yes?
Yeah, I think, in broad strokes, yes.
So because I play in the periphery of this this situation, I have a third option. I hate binary options. That's just me. But the third option, what if a never incarnate being, some being that is never been a human, who is not trapped in time, is able to emulate the person. And the reason why I ask, I know it sounds far out, but as Kate can...
it's like the trickster theory.
The trickster type of thing, which often comes up with UFO, aliens, that sort of thing, where you're given some information. Some people who purportedly are abducted in UFOs, and I know this is very far out, but bear with me.
Let me interrupt you, because I cannot speak to this per se, because this is not something that I study. So as all I know is the empirical research, the empirical data that I've collected under these very controlled readings where I give a name and I ask 5 questions and it's blinded and compare it to the other one. So I don't know what happens, what else there is, but it does speak to just all the gray area, right? We're talking about, like, my mediums on my team, this data that I've collected and published, it's deceased people that used to be alive people and now are deceased people. And so, but, our mediums talk about, like, the idea of guides, right? Like, where do they fall? Are they deceased people, or is there something else? And like you're saying, there's all kinds of other beings, and where do they fall? And like most things, it's probably a spectrum. There's binary categorization of things does not reflect reality. And I think it's dangerous to put these terminology, this vocabulary on these different experiences, because it implies we understand how this stuff works, and we don't.
Exactly.
And so by naming it, it implies that this is a real thing. Like, super psi is not a real thing. It is a philosophical conjecture. You can't demonstrate it in the lab. No one's ever shown it. It's just an idea, but it gets thrown around like it's a real thing, but it's not a real thing. So what we have to do as good scientists, as good researchers, we have to follow the data. And the data say that the two experiences are different. Psychic information about a living person and communication from the deceased are distinguishable experiences. And we have to just run with that. That's what we know. The same way that most of what we can know about pain or love or things like that are only from what someone can tell us about them. You can't take a meter and measure love or measure pain. And you can't measure psi yet. There's no meter yet. So we have to just rely on descriptions that the person who's having those experiences can give us.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, but it seems
I'm
like,
sorry I cannot speak about UFOs.
No, I didn't really want to speak about UFOs. Actually, what I was saying as an example for a discarnate entity that was never embodied as a human on the earth. I was using that as an example of somewhere where that exists, but you were very correct in saying that those mediums who have guides, many of them will tell the medium that, or the person contacting those guides, that they were, once Mork from Zork or something. And I'm not making fun of, it's just the first thing that came into my mind. I'm not making fun of the name of their guide. But they will tell the person that they are really Pleiadians or like that.
Right. Right. And
Well,
then
they could be
it's
from
one
the
of these things
Bronx,
like
too.
we're using words. Again, some people will use the word angel. Like, it doesn't
Yeah, or
mean,
jinn
is
or
that
whatever,
biblical angel,
Yeah.
right? Like, these are all terms, but it's all gray area. We don't really know exactly what we're ever talking about until to like speak authoritatively about this is this and this happens here. Like, no,
Exactly.
we can't do that. That's irresponsible.
I just say the others, whoever the others may be.
That's good.
Okay.
That's good.
But, with these, your team of mediums too, did they ever, I mean, just to get down to the nitty gritty here, did they ever contact a person who has been deceased and you had, I'm not going to say proof, but you had a lot of data that was collected that coincided with his or her living being? Or?
Yeah, this paper that we published in 2015, 58 readings were scored with those 5 questions, and they were the reading for the deceased person that of the sitters got scored as more accurate than just like the random control reading from the other person that had no relation to them. So that it did demonstrate what we call anomalous information reception, which is the conveying of accurate and specific information about a deceased person that could not be acquired through fraud and or feedback. Like the medium doesn't get any feedback during the reading because who's going to give it to her, right? Where it's just me and her on the phone, or with any prior knowledge about either the sitter or the deceased person beyond that first name. And we don't even give mediums feedback after the scoring takes place. We don't tell them like this is how you did, because that addresses the theory that they're using precognition to look into the future of when we tell them how they did on the reading in order to give the reading. So we never give the mediums feedback about accuracy data ever.
So what you really have to do, you've got it tough in 2 ways, because not only are you perhaps trying to convince people who are debunkers, let us say, as opposed to skeptics, that they're just materialist debunkers. You not only are trying to convince those individuals as best you can, but you need to convince other people within the research, the parapsychological research group, who can come in and say anything is telepathy or precognition or one of the other sort of psychic skills.
Well, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything.
Okay.
I'm an empirical researcher, and I collect the data and I draw conclusions based on the data collected, and then I publish that, and that's that's how science works, and that's scientific dissemination of knowledge. And what people do with that is totally up to them. That's not my job. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm just doing my job as a scientist.
And the help part, the helping people with their grief, how is that coming into the picture for you now with the new research center?
So we have 3 research programs, and they're codenamed Information Operation Application. So the Information Research Program looks at the accuracy and specificity of the information that mediums report. The Operation Research Program looks at their psychology, like their personality characteristics, their physiology, and their phenomenology, which is a fancy word for experiences. And then the application research program looks at the practical social applications for mediumship readings, including in assistance with finding missing persons or helping with law enforcement investigations, and then the potential application of mediumship readings in the treatment of grief. And so we've written about that. There's free fact sheets on our website about mediumship readings and grief and what sitters should know before they get a reading. And we haven't, the data, there isn't data yet. We're still in the process of collecting the data using a standardized grief instrument and using control groups and methodologically sound research to look, is receiving a mediumship reading helpful, harmful, or neither? And we don't have that data yet, but we're trying to finish up that data collection and get to the bottom of that question, because there might be certain segments of the grieving population that it works for, and there may be segments that it doesn't, or there may be the perfect time after the death to wait. And so there's so much to learn about that. Anecdotally, it looks like people have very profound experiences after receiving a mediumship reading, and it falls well within the current model of grief, which is called continuing bonds, which is they used to think, like in the 50s, to get over your grief, you have to let go. You have to accept the permanence of the loss. And that wasn't helping people. No one was feeling any better. So in the 80s, they sort of came up with this new theory, and it's sort of gaining footing, that you don't need to accept the permanence of the loss. You need to accept that your relationship is now different. So it went from one in the physical to one in the spiritual. And receiving a mediumship reading demonstrates that. It demonstrates that you still have a relationship with the deceased person, just not physically. And spontaneous after-death communication experiences also demonstrate that. Those are also really helpful for alleviating suffering around grief, but they're spontaneous, so you can't really create them or make them happen. I am working on a system.
That's anecdotal, I guess. You have to go with anecdotes on that. Go ahead.
Yeah. But, Rupert Sheldrake says the plural of anecdote is data.
Oh, okay.
So if enough people say it, like that's a real thing now. So, but we're bringing it into the lab, and we're using established grief instruments, like put a numerical value on the level of grief and that sort of thing, to really look at it quantitatively, if the effect on grief.
Well, that's wonderful.
Okay. Well, just as a totally unrelated question, in a sense, I don't know if you heard the background barking, but have you had? Okay, this is probably way out of your.
It is not.
Research.
I know what you're going to say.
Okay, go ahead. I know.
So
what about animals? Yeah, because
we're noticing in that fifth question, does the deceased person have any messages specifically for the sitter? We often found that they were saying, "Oh, he wants you to know he has the little white dog with him."
Get out, really? That's
and so we started a study where instead of a deceased person, we did the same exact protocol, except it was a deceased animal. And because animal names often are very give a lot away about the animal, we didn't use the animal's name. We used the sitter's first name, and that it also showed positive results. But we found that it was really difficult to work with those sitters because, oddly or not oddly, having had animals, those people were suffering so much more than the people who lost people.
That would be
and
us.
So it was difficult to continue with the study, because we were because we can't promise them that they're going to hear from their loved one, and it was very difficult to keep going with the study. But the initial data that we did collect was similarly statistically significant, like the people data was. It was the same. It was similarly significant for the animals.
Well, that's good.
And when I presented that at the SSE, the line of people waiting to ask me a question after that presentation went out the door, and people came up to me all afternoon. Scientists and physicists and clinicians came up to me and cried, and were thanking me for letting them believe that their dead animal is in the world still. That consciousness also exists. So it's very important to people.
Absolutely.
And that is another topic that we will provide educational materials around in order to alleviate suffering. Join our email list.
Yes.
We will tell you when they're up there.
What email is that?
If you go to windbridge.org, there's a join our email list button, and you can join right there.
And contribute too.
Oh, yes. And while you're there, give a donation on the donate button.
Well, Dr.
I'm
Beischel.
doing my radio voice.
Yes.
Is it confusing people? Is it lulling you into giving a donation?
Yes, give a donation. Give them some money. They deserve it. One thing that I'm sure you've heard innumerable times, I certainly have, I don't want to go to heaven if my dog isn't there or my cat or my fish. I mean, that's...
Yeah. And all kinds of animals have come through spontaneously, tarantulas, birds, goldfish, all kinds of animals have come through spontaneously to the mediums on my team. So there's compelling evidence that consciousness is the same. I don't remember who said it. Consciousness is the same in all living creatures, although the body of each is different.
Yes.
We had a calendar. That was one of the quotes. And I don't remember who said it. But that, why would it be any different? Everything else is similar. Why would that, and then the Stephen Jay Gould quote of the, at the heart of every scientific progression is the dethronement of human arrogance from one pedestal after another. Like, we are not about our centrality in the cosmos. Like, no, we're not the end all be all. Like, no, they often people will say, what differentiates people from animals is tools. No, animals have tools. Is emotion. Nope, animals have emotion. So whatever we think of, no, they do it too. So why would they, people say, spirituality. Like, you don't have any data that says your dog isn't talking to God every minute.
That's right. You know what dog spelled backwards is.
Exactly. So it's very dangerous to speak with great authority of like, we know this, or this can't be, or this is how this works. No, we don't know anything about anything at the end of the day.
So what you're saying is there's this huge sea of knowledge or consciousness, or again, that's a hard word to describe or, to just define. But
information.
But whatever, it's out there. And so different beings sort of pop in and out of it.
Well, there's even
sort of a different
the
way of
idea
looking at things.
Now that everything is conscious to some extent, right from this microphone to the desk to the ground.
It's all energy. It's just confined energy.
That's correct.
E equals MC squared.
We do have a question from our listener, Ellen Merritt. And she wants to know if it's possible to ask a medium simply if anyone has a message for you. In other words, if you went to a medium and you just wanted to say, I want to know if anybody in the great beyond has a message for me, and what would happen then?
Definitely. I think, you can do that. I think a lot of mediums will sort of start the session and say, okay, I do psychic readings in which I can talk about the future and and give you guidance on your own life, or I can do mediumistic communication and receive messages from your loved ones. Which one do you want to do? And some people say both, and the medium does one and then she does the other, and she switches gears. Or you can say one and the medium will concentrate on doing that one. So no, you don't need to. The less information you give a medium, the better for everyone. So by saying, hey, give me some messages, that's probably the best way you can do it, because you've given the medium no information.
Well,
So
I'm sure Ellen Merritt thanks you for that answer. I guess I want to speak a little bit to the idea of mediums having more illnesses, especially autoimmune illnesses. And I wanted to ask you if you had ever read the book by Belruth Naparstek, who is primarily a psychic, I believe, but wrote an amazing book on the different qualities that people who do psychic work and mediumship, of the different qualities of their personalities, often that they're survivors of some form of abuse, often they have autoimmune issues, often there's a whole variety of things she speaks to. I wondered if you ever came across Your Sixth Sense by Belruth Naparstek.
I didn't. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to look at that. Yeah, we, the scientific method is make an observation and then test it, right? So I was observing that the mediums on our team, they seem to have a lot more autoimmune diseases as someone with an autoimmune disease herself, I was recognized like, wow, you guys as a group have a lot more than would be expected by chance. So when we recently did a survey study where we got online survey data from about 300 mediums, about 1,000 non-mediums, we asked them about their disease burden, and it was much higher for the mediums, autoimmune and other symptoms. And then we also asked about, we had them take a child abuse scale, and that was also much higher for the mediums than for the non-mediums. And so I have previously presented at the SSE that my theory is that it isn't mediumship that causes disease, it's trauma, it's childhood trauma that causes both mediumship and disease. Because it's been demonstrated in the general mainstream literature, just not even mediums, anybody, childhood abuse results in adult disease.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that in any group.
Yeah, we just got a sterling example of that down in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a shame. But again, going back to your studies in immunology, which is, again, information and just drawing on a large pool of outside information, like external information, I wonder if maybe there's some connection there, too, like their body sort of recognizes one sort of outside information, and a person without autoimmune would...
That was my original theory, was I bet a medium, in having so many deceased people sort of come through her, does her body get confused?
Yeah.
That was my original theory, but this childhood abuse data is so strong. Like that's the thing that makes the more sense.
Yeah, well, it definitely plays a part. I mean, you can't discount that at all.
Well, I know that I suffered for some time with what is it called? Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disease. And I was this book by Bell Ruth Naparstek really made me realize what these things were going on in my body. And I am not a medium. I have chosen not to be a medium. I have actively chosen not to be a medium.
Me too.
Okay. Because I was when I was a little child, I always had beings in my room, and I was terrified. And even as a teenager, I had people come up to me who were had to do with a woman in England who did mediumship, a famous woman, again, whose name escapes me at the moment. But people wanted me to be a medium, and I tried it a little bit, and I found it very, very unsettling and did not feel well at all afterwards, even worse than with the psychic readings. So
do you associate that, like, because that's voice, right? The thyroid is in your throat. So
That's
do you
true.
associate that with something about voice and the disease, or like, are you associating it with those mediumistic experiences?
No, I'm not. I think that the thyroid issue had to do with my psychic work, just as a psychic reader, really more than having to do with mediumship. Terror kept me from being a medium as a younger person, because I could never sleep, because I always felt all these beings around me. And a person could say that I was just crazy, and that would be one.
Well, that's one of the things, like, that's another, sorry, a motorcycle was driving by. That's another topic that we want to try and alleviate suffering around, is people have these experiences and they don't know what to do with them. So can we offer some kind of training, or like, this is what you can expect, and this is how to control it, and this is how to not let in experiences that you don't want to have, and that sort of thing. Like, that in and of itself, it can alleviate a lot of suffering right there. And that's also on our list of things to do in the future, if we get some donations and we can keep our doors open.
Yes, I certainly hope you do. Just to finish my piece here about the thyroid and Miss Bell Ruth Naparstek, et cetera. At the time that I was afflicted with this, what happened was I was misusing, you could say, my psychic gifts by doing, like, 10 hours of psychic reading a day due to working at events, at parties. And I would leave those places completely drained and exhausted after, say, doing 2 holiday parties in the New York area, 4 hours in the afternoon and 4 hours at night, completely drained and with incredible bloodlust. I would have to find a hamburger somewhere. And I am not much of a meat eater. Otherwise, I'm not 100% vegetarian, nor was I then. But that was the way my diet tended towards vegetarianism, and to be so much desiring the meat, like I have to get that hamburger. I just have to find that bar with that juicy hamburger. It was very bizarre, and so I associate the thyroid issues with psychic reading because mediumship I had left behind some years previously.
Okay, but doing too much of it is what you're saying.
Yes, abusing my gift as well, because at an event you have to read minimally 10 persons an hour. The party planners want you to keep the guests coming, and you sit down with the guest and you tell them about their life, and they get up, and then the next one sits down, and you could be reading 100 persons in a day in that circumstance of 2 4-hour shifts rather.
Everything in moderation.
Yes, indeed. I just thought I would put that in for.
So you I'm sure you still have some ties to the old schools where you graduated from. What do they think of your interest today? Like,
I really don't. I really don't have a lot of. Yeah.
Did you drop them, or did they drop you, or did you just drift apart?
I'm just like, this research takes so much time. Like the other day, it was Mark and I's 10th wedding anniversary. And people were saying, "Oh, what are you going to do?" Thank you. And people were saying, "What are you going to do?" Like, we're going to work like we do every day. And that's what we did. And so it's not like it's just one of those things when you're so busy that you just don't have time to see people, like new friends or old friends. And unfortunately, I think that's what happened in that case.
Well,
when are we going to see each other? I'm not at biology meetings, and they're not at SSE meetings. So where would I see them? Yeah.
Well, if you love what you do, it's never work. And
right.
You've obviously found your calling in this world.
Well, yes, and we have one question. Will we be seeing you at the SSE meeting this summer in Las Vegas?
I submitted my abstract yesterday, so we'll see.
Well, we'll have to put it out to the universe. Well,
we'll intend that they have you come. I'm sure. I feel confident that you'll be there in that case. So we're going to wrap this up at this time, and thank you so much for being with us. And do you have anything else to say in finality here that you want to get across, or some anecdote or piece of information you think would be interesting to our listeners?
Thank you so much for having me. I think on our website, windbridge.org, there's a lot of free materials if you want to learn more. I put up a couple videos about what is a medium and what kind of things does a medium say, and we have a couple fact sheets. Again, we're just getting off the ground, so there's not ideally we'll be able to keep the doors open and make a lot more of these things. But right now there's a few, and you can look on our website, and if you are so inclined, there's peer-reviewed research journal articles there that you can download too. There's lots of things. And while you're there, join our email list and make a donation.
Well, the final thing that I have to say is that we did have a gentleman on from, his name was Tom, and he was on from one of the people who tries to get voice phenomena.
EVP?
EVPs. And he was on our show back over a year ago, and we had an incredible anomalous voice come on Kate's channel. We record on 3 channels, Julie.
Lucky moi.
And that would be my channel, Kate's channel, and you, the guest channel, whoever is the guest. Well, Tom hung up, and his channel was down and dead at the time, and we were wrapping up the show, which is what we'll do after we say goodbye to you. And Kate was saying something. I forget what she was saying, and we heard this incredible voice. And it came in on her channel, and I'm sitting right next to her. I could see her. She did not make the noise, and it was not in the room. But you might find that interesting to listen to if such things are of interest to you.
Well, my expertise is in mediumship, but my husband, Mark, his expertise is in EVP and ITC.
Oh, get out, really?
So when you have him on, he can talk about that.
Well, we would love to have Dr. Mark Bacuzzi on our show. I just want to put his full name in there so we know who we're talking about. So,
well, and,
go ahead.
We're a really good team because he's not a doctor, and his training is in the real world and engineering and software engineering. And so he thinks a different way than I do, which, I came up through the science and the academia. And so he thinks in a different way than I do. And so we make a perfect team, a research team. And so I just didn't want to let you say that. And people say you didn't correct them. But so he's not a doctor, but that makes him a really good research partner because he isn't sullied in all of the baggage that comes with being trained in academia. So he has so many good ideas that I don't think I could ever come up with. And together we come up with some really great ideas.
But, you're almost like the new computers that they're coming along. Like you have the quantum computer married now to the algorithmic type computer. And between the two of them, these computers starting to think and come up with ideas as opposed to just constant, I was solving this equation, that equation, the other thing. So I think you've actually hit on something.
Yeah, we always come up. We're always continually grateful for the ideas that we come up with together that I don't think either of us could come up with alone. I'm really grateful for this team, research-wise and life partner-wise. We make a really good team.
Great.
Well, once again, thank you, Dr. Julie Beischel of the Windbridge Research Center and the Windbridge Institute. Thank you very much for being on Shattered Reality Podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great talking to you. Best of luck in the future too. You're doing good work.
We hope to see you in June this year.
Right, in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Okay. So long now.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
So
that was pretty interesting.
It's very interesting, and she's just really such a pure scientist. It's wonderful, and what I liked so much about her saying that we don't know what a lot of these things are. Obviously, she got away from the binary choices that seem to be implicit in such research, and I'm glad. I couldn't be more gratified that she did display interest in it not being a binary thing, and that it could be something that we don't know about at all, which is of interest to me. And so here we are at Shattered Reality.
Yeah, I guess another Shattered Reality. Well, do you have announcements before we?
Well, we want to invite anybody who has had a paranormal experience and listens to the show to be in our listeners' corner. We had quite a few in a row there for a while, and now we need some new blood in the area. Only not literally speaking. Please don't bleed. We need some new stories so that you can be in our listeners' corner, and also we invite comments. And questions as we got from Ellen Merritt, our listener. So I think we do have a few upcoming shows, but we're a little uncertain about the dates on things, so we're
Okay.
gonna not talk about them right now. But if you have requests for people being on, please keep in mind that we do want people with a broad range of experience in any kind of anomalous phenomena or edge science, but we generally do not have claimants. So if you have a way to make $3 million overnight or any other extraordinary claims.
Well, let's not, let's not refuse everybody.
Yeah, those millions of dollars we could use as well. But still the same, we're not doing claimants. Anything else other than that involves studies or ideas about paranormal phenomena. We're very interested in new books and that sort of thing. So,
Okay. Well, I guess this draws to close.
yes,
Okay.
indeed.
So from
Shattered reality. Adios,
Adios, amigos.
amigos and amigos.